of color in our country get sick and die from COVID-19 at disproportionately high rates. And as we reckoned with the pandemic, the murder of George Floyd forced our country's inequalities into broad daylight. Indeed, as we continue to witness acts of injustice against people of color in our country, most recently with the shooting of Jacob Blake and the heartbreaking news about Daniel Prude, we have no choice but to shift our attention to the ongoing plight of our fellow citizens because of racism. When George Floyd was murdered, I took a moment to reflect on what I personally believe about the biases we each carry and how we must each respond. I believe that we are responsible for acknowledging what we don't know. I believe that we are responsible for listening more and hearing new voices and asking more questions. I believe that we are responsible for understanding how our actions and inaction sustain racism in our society. And I believe that we as Jews must engage with the world around us. Our tradition teaches us that despite our imperfections and limitations, we all have a duty to engage with and shape our world. The type of change our country needs will require both sweeping action and small acts. It will require institutional reform and strong leadership. But we as individuals must also take the time and do the work to understand our own part in the problem so that we can be part of the solution. At Federation, we are committed to being part of the solution, to listening and learning to the experiences of others, to being friends and allies with those facing oppression, to dismantling systemic injustice wherever we see it. When the pandemic upended life for so many, I noticed that many of us seemed more open to new ideas. The world forced us to challenge our assumptions, ask new questions, and open ourselves up to different possibilities. My hope is that as a community, we can extend that open-minded approach and willingness to learn to our conversations about race and racial inequality. That is why Federation has invited you here today to listen and to learn. To make ourselves open and receptive to what we hear, even if it makes us uncomfortable. To reflect on what we can do as a community to address racial inequality. And to understand how we can be better friends and allies. I am grateful for this opportunity to have a conversation with Reverend Tim Warner and his family. The last time I shared a stage with Reverend Warner was when the Federation and JCRC brought our community members together to speak out against hate after the Pittsburgh shootings. It was so meaningful for Tim to stand with the Jewish community at such a difficult time. Thank you. And thank you to Women's Philanthropy for hosting this program. I would like to welcome Sybil Ottenstein, who will help set the intention for today's session. Sybil.
I'm unmuted. Perfect. Hi again, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sybil Ottenstein, and I run an organization that is all about how to be present during life's difficult conversations. So I'm giving a quick little intro here. So many of us may have found ourselves caught off guard by George Floyd's murder and ensuing social unrest. Perhaps for some of us, this cascaded into a lovely round of self-flagellation, asking questions like, where have I been? Or what took me so long to wake up to all of the injustice happening around me? And from there, perhaps some of us felt this immediate surge into action. What can I do now? How can I make this better? How can I help? What can I do? And all of that whole process is so kind, and it's so well-intentioned, and it's so good and loving. But before we spring into action and go directly into do mode, we must first pause and really listen. To really listen to the lived experiences and realities of our Black brothers and sisters. And with that quality of listening, we acknowledge and we understand that the experience of living in a Black body in this country is so radically different from the experience of living in a white body in this country. And that systemic racism manifests in so many ways, from the myriad of microaggressions that Black folks experience on a daily basis to the more egregious acts of brutal racialized violence. So with that, today, we are here to listen, to really deeply and actively listen to the experiences of others. And if within that listening, at any point, we find ourselves becoming uncomfortable or defensive or just feeling like ucky, that's okay. That's normal. And there's really just an invitation there to notice it and to be with that discomfort, to get curious about it. Where's that coming from? What's that all about? Because it really is through that discomfort that we're able to truly grow and learn together as a community. So today we come together with a truly open heart and an open mind. And let's remember that the journey towards fighting against systems of oppression and becoming actively anti-racist is a life's work. It's a lifelong process. This is not the sort of thing that occurs in a day's workshop or a singular event. And because of that, this is really the beginning of what we hope will be a very long arc. But here we are, starting today, present and open, listening together. Thank you.
Okay. And the mute. Sorry. Okay. Thank you, Gil and Federation, for supporting this effort. Thank you, Sybil, for setting the tone, for opening our hearts. It was almost 2 years ago that I sat with so many of you in the sanctuary at Adas Israel to mourn the deaths of those killed at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. Among the many interfaith speakers was Reverend Timothy Warner. His words touched my heart. The following Sunday, I attended one of his church services with my husband, father, and friends. That was the beginning of our relationship, of our friendship. After the horrific deaths of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd, I reached out to Tim and asked, how can I support you? So fast forward to this evening and tonight's program, where Reverend Tim, his daughter, and 2 godchildren are here to share with us their experience as Black Americans living in a systemically racist America. In conversation with Tim's godson, Joe, he asked me, what does my heart break for? My heart breaks when I hear the stories of Black mothers who lose their children senselessly because of the color of their skin. When the world heard George Floyd call for his mother, all mothers were called to this cause. I'm honored that Federation's Women's Philanthropy is sponsoring this 3-part webinar. We hope that tonight strengthens the foundation from which we build relationships, collaborate on meaningful projects, and ultimately create positive change. And now it's my honor to introduce our guests. First, Jordan Warner Graham is a high school world studies teacher at Blair High School. She serves as co-director for Pivot Basketball Camp, a program that provides spiritual guidance and mentorship through the game of basketball to underserved youth in the DMV. Joya Daniels is a special education resource teacher and the co-director of Pivot Basketball Camp with Jordan. Dr. Joseph Daniels III is a scholar, leader, mentor, and community builder. He earned his PhD in civil engineering at the University of Arkansas. Joe believes in building community through social justice, economic empowerment, and intentional relationship building through a startup called Build Community Through Love. And leading this discussion is Reverend Tim Warner, a community builder and pastor in Montgomery County for more than 20 years. He's currently the proud pastor of 2 churches, one black, one white, and continues daily in the work of crossing boundaries of race, class, and religion. Thank you, Tim, and your family for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ellen. And I'm so grateful to you and Gil and the Federation and JCRC for inviting us to have this conversation with you tonight. I'd also like to thank the group of exceptional women who worked with us to help organize our time together tonight. I think the start that you have made is very impressive, and I hope it'll lead to a long and productive dialogue and conversation. I also need to thank my children and my godchildren, who you will meet later on, for letting me harangue them into being here tonight. They're very busy folks, and I'm grateful that they've taken some time out. It's mostly because they care so much about these issues. Let me just share a couple of words about how I understand this event. By way of introduction, I'm a child of an all-Black, all-poor community who grew up in the 1960s, and I remember images of Rabbi Heschel and Martin Luther King walking together that I saw on television. I know how integral the Jewish community and others were to the civil rights movement. It is my era. I was reading Rabbi Heschel while listening to Martin Luther King speeches and hearing justice-centered preaching when I was 10 or 11 years old in church. And I was raised in the church under the leadership of Dr. Robert Johnson Smith, who attended Morehouse with Martin Luther King and taught us intentionally and consistently not only how the narrative of the Hebrew children in Egypt was like the African-American story, but that their narrative was our narrative. My Blackness and my Christianity have always been inextricably linked, but what is more is that both parts of that single identity have necessarily been steeped in the justice that's demanded by the particular God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And for us, at least, as Christians, as revealed in Jesus Christ. Like Dr. Cornel West, who I first heard say this, and I've been saying it of myself ever since, I've never known myself to be anything other than a free Black man and an unashamed Christian. Those things go together for me always and everywhere. I would have never made it through Biblical Hebrew in seminary, 1 and 2, by the way, without the help of Rabbi Daniel Parker, whose synagogue my family cleaned together for years after my father launched his own janitorial business when I was in high school. I went to every single bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah in junior high school because I was often one of very few Blacks in my classes, all of which had many young Jews in them, and we were invited. Most went for the amazing parties, but I went because I was fascinated with this rite of passage that was rooted in God, wondering why the African-American community didn't have one of those in either our religious or cultural tradition. And I sat shiva with families with whom we were intimately connected, and as well as sat at many a Passover Seder, thinking what a gift it is to have a mandatory discussion at the dining room table about how far God has brought the Jewish family and Jewish people, and lamenting that there's no such experience in the Black church. I've been blessed during the entire course of my public ministry to have done so with Jewish friends and leaders at my side, among others, collaborating with me as we sought to build community in so many ways together. That's why when I was asked to come to speak at a local synagogue after the Pittsburgh massacre, I was happy to do it. Jews, to this extent, are my people. Not only have they endured unimaginable suffering at the hands of hateful people for millennia, but they've suffered and thrived somehow in it. And that's my narrative too. And once you've been a part of that story, standing against injustice is an essential necessity. Part of what breaks my heart today, in the midst of such unrest around racial justice in this country and in this world, when the relationship between Blacks and Jews seems strained at best, is that while Blacks are surviving in the current suffering, we are not thriving. And I can't help but feel that there's some pages from the Jewish notebook that need to be shared and digested. What's worse, the thing that is most crucial for that to happen is the formation and leveraging of relationships of trust on which a future where everybody thrives can be built. Relationships of trust, particularly those which cross barriers, are essential to any meaningful change in community. Wherever that community is, whoever the people are, relationships of trust are the foundation of what can grow. Those relationships matter most when we can work together where the structures of structural racism can be torn down together and reconstructed with God's shalom in mind. I believe Rabbi Heschel when I read that when one understands the spark of the divine that exists within another human being, he or she cannot harbor hatred for them. And that's why that we are where we are some 50 years later is such a big problem for me. Here's what he also said in his opening address at the National Conference on Religion and Race in Chicago in January of 1963, at which King was a featured speaker. And this is where this very old rubber still meets the too long and too winding road for us tonight. Seen in the light of our religious tradition, the Negro problem is God's gift to America. The test of our integrity, a magnificent spiritual opportunity. America, it seems to me, still has a chance to find redemption through our efforts to eliminate the sinful scourge of racism. I also realize that the civil rights narrative by now is an old one, and that while I can train and facilitate others in this work, the hard work, the struggle, if you will, now belongs to the millennials and the Xers and the Yers. So as I was asked about my perspective in this forum, my thoughts went immediately to the children that my wife and I and our best friends have raised together as children and godchildren together. I've asked them to come and share as it is their voices which now have the most meaning. It's their perspectives upon which the new relationships must be formed and leveraged. I think their voices, however, will challenge us tonight because they're asking questions that are hard for us to answer. They ask questions of us like, what happened to the relationship between Blacks and Jews over the last 50 years? And why did it happen? They ask questions like, I know that to be Jewish may be cultural and spiritual or nationalistic all at the same time, but Jews have become white and largely wealthy in America. So are they more white, or are they really about the justice the God you keep telling us about demands? Thank God they're all gifted. They all have agency. They all understand justice existentially. They all have opinions about it. You'll hear them. And while they may not articulate it as such, tikkun olam, this idea of repairing the world, is important to each of them. And that's why I've asked them to sit with me before you tonight. And so we invite you into our fishbowl, a technique we use often in community building where observers are invited to look in and observe and learn from those who they don't know well. We hope to finish our conversation about what it means to be Black in America right now in time for us to have some questions at the end. So I hope you'll be thinking about those as you hear us dialogue. Just know that as you're looking through foggy glass to see us, the same glass is also foggy looking out at you too. So let's jump right in. And I'll ask, we'll work from the youngest, from the oldest to the youngest on this one. By way of introduction, would each of you offer your perspective about what has been most on your heart in this season as it relates to racial justice, and tell us out of your own experience how you came to have those perspectives. What do you need people to know tonight? I'll ask Jordan to start first.
Okay, thank you, Pastor Warner, Dad. Again, my name is Jordan Warner, and I think I'm gonna come from the perspective of in education. So just so we're all clear, all of the panelists here, Joya, Joey, myself, we come from a very middle-class background and have been afforded, I would have to say, quite a bit of privilege. Growing up as kids, we were given opportunities to travel, to see the world. We've never wanted for anything. We grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland, very diverse county. And we're challenged by our parents and our families to take the honors level classes, the AP classes, and we're not given a choice. We knew we had to take these classes. So I'm coming from that perspective. And as a teacher now, the inequities in that lane are just really, really, really present, and it's kind of painful to see. So I guess that's where my passion is. As a high school teacher, I see the lack of diversity in these AP classes. No one is really challenging our Black and brown kids to take these honors level classes. I see the alarming rate at which our kids are disciplined as opposed to their white peers. I see the lack of pushing our kids to rise to the occasion when we don't think that we can handle those honors level classes, and saying, hey, you probably aren't equipped for this as the teacher, maybe you consider going back down a couple levels. So that's where I see in the education realm, and that's kind of where my passion is, to kind of advocate for these kids. I have a son as well. He's very young, but I know that that has been passed down to me because my parents advocated for me, a very, very gifted person. And no matter how gifted I was, they still had to come into the classroom and talk to my teachers for me and say, hey, the expectation is that she's going to rise to this level, and I need you to have that same expectation too, regardless of what her skin color is. So my passion is surrounding that and making sure we are able to advocate for our kids and to provide them opportunities to understand that they are able to learn and to achieve at really high levels.
Thanks, Joy. Would you dive in?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Joya Daniels. I, too, am going to take the perspective of an educator. I am a special education resource teacher now, but long ago, I used to be that kid who was serviced by a special education teacher in elementary school with a hearing disability. So my heart just kind of breaks for right now the young African-American and brown babies who are in elementary school where I work, and how they go from once looking cute, once looking adorable little kids to then threats when they jump into middle school and high school. And so as a child, I've always wanted to help others the way that I've been helped. And that has been through, godparents, that's been through teachers who've advocated on my behalf. That's also been through my parents who have always been in my corner. And I've always wanted to, in the IEP system, and which is the individualized education program that we have in Montgomery County and throughout the country, our young brown babies, in particular males, are thrown into special ed and are qualified for special education services under some of these codes just because they are seen as quote unquote different. And so what I do is I like to advocate for those that I run across, just to make sure that they are not being discriminated against, that they are not being penalized for content that they may not know, or different learning styles that they do not have that their other peers do have. And so I kind of look through that lens and that perspective, and like Jordan, advocating for these kids to push themselves out even further. And with our basketball camp, Pivot Basketball Camp, we also offer a lot of mentorships through sports, because you can learn a lot about life through sports. So that's the perspective that I'm looking through today.
Thank you. And Joe, would you wrap this one up for us?
Yeah, for sure. I'm Dr. Joe Daniels. My family knows me as Joey. And so I got my PhD at the University of Arkansas. I got my undergraduate degree from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. It's a HBCU in Greensboro, North Carolina. I too grew up in Montgomery County, had a plethora of opportunities to do different things. The four of us online got to go to Korea, South Korea, back when we were little kids. And so when we tell you we have a world perspective, like, we come with a true world perspective. We've been to places throughout the Caribbean. Joya, Jordan, and Uncle Tim with a group of others were in Zimbabwe a couple years ago. And so when we come with a worldly perspective, we are super serious about coming with a worldly perspective. For me, I got my undergrad again from HBCU. I've done internships in oil and gas industries, where a lot of my interns thought that I went to an easy school because I was able to maintain a 4.0 grade point average for 6 semesters in an engineering program. So you know, I already kind of come in, I come with the perspective that we have to challenge the majority white society that just because it's a Black institution does not mean that it's less than. I went to get my PhD at the University of Arkansas, where I was the only Black graduate student in my department, and for a while, the only Black person from my department to graduate with a PhD. And so the farther I've climbed, the more isolated I've become when it comes to a race standpoint. My heart breaks for systems that are designed and well run that continue to leave Black and brown kids and Black and brown adults and young adults systemically disinherited from being able to achieve the things in which they've been put on earth to achieve. These systems that include banking, real estate, employment, you name it, the healthcare system. And so I'd like to keep working to maintain, I like to keep working to find ways to build within the system, or even reform systems, or tear down and rebuild systems that make everything fair and equitable for everybody who's involved.
Thanks, Joe. We've been invited here because of relationships of trust that I've built with Jewish people of goodwill, who have a genuine desire to know more authentically about the African American experience, what we are going through, how do we see things. What do you think are the biggest barriers to building real relationships between Blacks and Jews at this current moment in history? And whichever you would like to address that, just jump in first. But I want you to talk about things that will actually produce something that you think will change what we're going through now.
I'll start. I think it would be nice to be noticed. I think that's the biggest thing ever. I have a father who's pretty brown skinned, and oftentimes he'll be in Giant or Safeway or anywhere, and you know, he's 6'3", you know, bald head, and you know, people will just run into him. And his biggest thing, he'll ask my mom, like, I must be invisible. And, you know, that's a thing that I always just kind of feel as well. Like, you know, this whole thing that happened with George Floyd, it seems like it just awakened this thing that was always behind closed doors, as if it just wasn't always out in the atmosphere. You know, police killing, you know, Black and brown kids. I mean, you know, starting with Rodney King back in the early 90s, it being caught on tape. And then from there, things always being picked up more and more about police killing, about vigilante killings, all these different types of things. And so I know for me, the one thing that I just want to do is, and start off with, is just to be noticed, and not to notice me as just, you know, another human being. Notice me as a Black person in this country, and notice that my Blackness and my culture all matter. And, you know, I think that reigns supreme right now, and just the outcry from around the world that just says Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, Joe, I think I see something like that in my own perspective as a pastor. I have well-meaning folks, and I pastor both a white congregation and an African-American congregation. And in my white congregation, well-meaning folks say to me, well, Pastor, I'm so glad you're here. We don't see color, is what they say. Mm-hmm. And the well-intentioned comment actually cuts, because what it means is that you don't see me.
Right.
I show up Black everywhere I am, and I think folks don't understand what it means to be seen. Joy or Jordan, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. This whole theme of visibility, I think it cuts so hard is because African Americans and Black people don't have that privilege to not be seen. Like, we are here and you see us, and I think white people have the privilege to ignore and to just decide that they don't really care or have to worry about it. It's a conversation that we've had before about how, you know, I was not allowed to attend an HBCU like Joey because my parents felt like they needed to prepare me to be able to live in a majority white world. And so, you know, from being a child, we've been forced. It's our survival kind of depends on it, on living and learning how to live in a white world, and it's just not the opposite. So that is kind of the frustrating part for me, is knowing that I have to learn to navigate a world that doesn't care to navigate me and to learn about me and to care about me and my humanity. So that's where I am.
So I'm hoping,
Absolutely.
I'm hoping, Jordan, that you don't feel too tortured by your parents who pushed you.
No,
but,
I don't feel tortured at all. I just bring that up to say that that's something that we've had to learn as kids. So it's been with us from the beginning, that we've had to learn how to navigate this when people are really when white people have the privilege to really not have to worry about what it is that we worry about. Yeah. That's all.
Yeah. W.E.B. Du Bois says that to be African in America is to live with a certain two-ness, where you need to navigate in the African American world, and you also, as a matter of survival, need to know how to operate in the white world, and that's part of that dynamic.
Absolutely. And even going with that piece of visibility, it's, you know, we want to be visible, we want to be heard, but we also don't want to be stereotyped in the process by, you know, misconceived perceptions throughout this journey. You know, what you may think or may appear, or what may appear is not exactly what is. And so it's always just being mindful of what your preconceived notions are, what your preconceived stereotypes are, and then really reflecting and analyzing within self, why, and asking why are these preconceived notions in your head, so to speak, and then asking what can I do to change them, because not all Black and brown people come from the same places, have the same experiences, and things like that. So that's another piece along visibility that I wanted to add.
But even adding on to that, like, it's this idea of like changing the narrative, right? And so when something happens, the quickest thing that happens, especially in mass media, is this change of narrative. And so it's not that this guy was innocent, not doing anything, and got shot 7 times in the back. It's like, oh, but he had prior warrants, he had this, he had that. And so the idea that, you know, when it's time for you to consume information about the outcries as to why we're protesting, why we're crying out, why we're continuing to pursue justice, it's, you know, the moment that happens, there's a change in narrative of, you know, this guy was, you know, he looked aggressive. And so I got to figure out, in the last 20 years, did he have anything in his record that may have shown that he was aggressive? And all of a sudden now we're painting these pictures of Black and brown people, and it's easy to stay silent because you're believing in these narratives that continue to keep the divide. And so understand that we as people are good people. Not everybody is good, but genuinely speaking, we're good people. And so you have to be able to sift through the noise and sift through all this stuff going on and be able to understand that at the core, we are still good people, God-fearing people. And, you know, you can't allow society to continue to condition you to believe that we are the alternative. And so in seeing us, you have to also understand that there is a narrative that's being developed and devised over time consistently from the very first movie that came out that depicted in blackface Black men being monsters and thugs and rapists, and change the narrative to understand that we're pastors, we're doctors, we're teachers, we're raising your kids. We're doing all these things. We work in the hospital industry. We're not just entertainers. We're not just rappers. We don't just shoot basketball. We don't just shut up and dribble.
Absolutely.
I think it's a great point. Joe, you raised the question of silence. And I'm wondering what it means for you essentially 30 somethings now, what the silence of white people or anybody in that, for that matter, means to you as a Black person around racial justice.
Was that for me?
For any of you. But go ahead.
I mean, I'll jump right in and say the silence is deafening. Silence tells me that, one, I'm invisible. We as a people are invisible. Silence also tells me that you clearly have not been disturbed enough to care about my well-being. Even though I look just like you, we might have the same walk. The only difference is my color of skin and probably my texture of hair. But the fact that there's nothing that moves certain groups of people is definitely bothersome. You know, my dad has always told me this, and I know he's preached in his sermons a couple times. I'm not sure where he's gotten it from, but sometimes we have got to disturb the comfort and comfort the disturbed. And right now, I feel as though our society is being disturbed. And those that are sitting by comfortably should be disturbed, should be asking, what is it can we do? How can we get involved? And then not only having these courageous conversations, but then taking next steps. So that's how the silence feels to me.
Okay, thank you.
The silence is heartbreaking and it's frustrating because it really does just speak to not being seen. And then also it does speak to the privilege of not feeling like you have to care about us. And the frustrating part for me is, why don't you feel like you have to care about me? I have to care about literally everything else that you all care about. What is it about my life and my people's life that you just cannot seem to care about? Why doesn't it break your heart that someone was just murdered in the street? And like, it doesn't become any clearer. Like, we have it all on camera. You hear what people are saying to people as they're dying. You can literally see it happening and it doesn't disturb you. Like, what kind of person are you? And so that's where it quite frankly makes me angry as well. It works me up. And then I just, because it happens so frequently, I just feel burdened and so tired, and just, again, the frustration is a theme there. I just, and I see a lot of people in our chat are asking, like, what can we do? And while I know we're going to get to that and we're going to try to come and work together to create tangible ideas of how we can work through this together, my answer is, I don't know. I wish I knew. I wish I knew how to make you care about Black people. And it also is kind of frustrating for me to be asked that question, because we're living it every single day. And no, I don't have to be followed around in a restaurant or in a store. I don't have to have been pulled over and called the N-word. None of that has happened to me, but if my people are feeling it, I feel it. I know what my experiences are growing up, and feeling like I've had to work twice as hard as my white peers and counterparts and still not feel like I'm afforded the same respect and measured by my giftedness as somebody else might have been. So yeah, that's me. That's where I feel. That's where I am on that.
Thanks. We'll let Joe chime in, and we'll move to some. I'm sorry, I always cut you off because there's a time delay. You want to finish up?
No, that's fine. No, that's it. You got it.
I'm sorry. Joe, why don't you weigh in, and then we'll move to maybe some solutions.
Yeah, for sure. So I was going to say pretty much what the two of you guys said. So Jordan, as you was finishing up, I was thinking about something different. For me, the silence makes me wonder, like, do I serve a different God than what my white community serves? Because I'm sitting here wondering, like, okay, the Bible must be a Bible for white folk, and it must be a Bible for Black folk. Because my Bible talks about loving everybody. My Bible talks about all different types of things that I don't see in society. So, you know, when you're silent, it raises the question, like, are you playing church? Are you playing God? Are you playing what you reading, what you learning? Or are we in this thing because we realize that we serve a God who is almighty and all powerful, and, you know, has brought us to this world to serve, but in serving, we're going to find that we're going to suffer as well. And so in that suffering, there has to be some kind of outcry with your actions or with your words or both. And so when there's silence, it makes me wonder, you know, maybe there's another God that I don't know, and maybe we just serve two different gods.
Boy, that's a deep question. Let me just say for people, because I don't think I mentioned it explicitly, that both Joya and Joe are my wife's and my godchildren. We had the pleasure of meeting and becoming fast and deep and lifelong friends with their parents while undergraduates at American University. Jordan is not a single child. She is a sibling, Benjamin, who wound up having to be on a business trip and tried to be with us, but could not. But they've all essentially been raised by the four of us together. And so I'm happy that they're here tonight. So having said all of that and heard all of that, and we barely even scratched the surface tonight, what do you think are the tangible steps we can take to do some real racial justice work together? Not just the stuff that shows up in the newspaper where everybody nods and pats each other on the back and says, "Oh, that's a great thing," but things that change the systems and structures, things that change how we understand one another, things that make us authentically and deeply see one another. What are those steps we can take to move towards that?
I would say, as for starters, I think we have to just look at the disparities that are blaringly obvious. We understand that slavery was a major economic benefactor for those who were able to own humans on this continent, and so we have to understand that there is economic disparities that's completely different for the haves and the have-nots, and a lot of that is factored on racial lines. And so we have to start looking at ways in which we can begin investing in communities, especially communities of color, because to me, I don't think communities of colors are inadequate. I just think they've for a long time, centuries, have not been given access to resources that give them the ability and position them to thrive. And so I think we got to start looking and researching ways in which we can begin penetrating these communities and start feeding in resources. Now, resources don't always have to be dollars, although those always help, but just finding ways in which, we can target different things. And I mean, there's something that I know Joya and Jordan have focused on their target mission as they're working with students of color in the DC, Baltimore, Washington area. And so I know they can speak on something very specifically, but it's important that we begin isolating different or identifying different areas where we can begin providing and pouring resources and to provide that access, especially to young kids who are on the brink of possibly dropping out or on the brink of being behind reading. And there's massive studies that talk about if, where you are reading at a third grade level can dictate where you go, with school and education and the like.
Thanks, Joe. And I think I just want to point out from your comment that the disparities between communities that you made reference to are actually intentional, and the structures cause the disparities. And the folks who made the structures are now profiting from the disparities of those communities. That is a structure that needs to be broken. And the question is, how do we do it? But you've raised an excellent point. Joya and Joe and Jordan. Do you want to weigh in on this one?
Yeah, no, I was gonna see, Joya, do you want to talk about just like what we do through Pivot as far as like investing into our community?
Absolutely, absolutely. So Pivot Basketball Camp was formerly known as a Jesus Jam. When my godfather, Uncle Tim, and my father, Joe Daniels, started an outreach program connecting youth from marginalized areas and disenfranchised areas, bringing them together to West River Retreat Center, and basically discussing basketball and God and ways to educate young men at first, and then the camp became co-ed. So I want to say after about 2006, it kind of went dormant a little bit. And then Jordan and myself basically resurrected the camp and now called it Pivot Basketball Camp. And so what we do is we provide mentorship opportunities. We provide, educational opportunities through basketball to teach our young kids about life and how to proceed through life and how to give each other grace and how to live in grace and really how to exist in the world that doesn't often see them. And so one of the things that we've done so far is we meet for a week over the summer, and we weren't able to do it this past summer due to COVID-19, but we partner with our retreat center in the Baltimore, Washington conference area, and we have 1 week of overnight festivities where we, pick a topic. We speak about the topic through the Bible perspective, as well as through the life perspective, and how, we can better ourselves as human beings in the world. Just trying to capture those kids who, like Joey said, are just on the cusp of turning in the wrong direction. And then trying to write them on a path where they have peers that are not too far in age gap that they can look up to.
Yeah, and to build
Go ahead,
on
I'm
that.
sorry.
Yep, to build on that. So we talked about financial investment into the community, and we are also working on kind of investing in our kids by pouring into them as campers and then giving them the opportunity to actually work the camp too, so that they can also pour into younger kids what they've learned and what they've experienced in their life. And through that, we've kind of been able to create a culture where we get to keep tabs on everyone and to stay close and to kind of build that community, which is so important and vital for African-American communities to thrive, because we've been historically split up. And I think we're even today still seeing the repercussions of not truly understanding what community should be for us as African Americans. So we're trying to revamp and kind of breathe life into that idea of community through our camp, through the mentoring, through the basketball, and just being present for kids who may not see someone like Joya, Joey, and myself who can offer a different perspective from what these kids may not be used to.
Absolutely. And it's not only just that week, it's, throughout the year that we're trying to connect with them and to have them share their experiences with others to make others want to come and join the community as well.
Well, thanks. We are coming near the end of our time, and I want to make sure that we get to some of the questions that are out here. There are a bunch of them that sort of proceed this way. Folks are expressing empathy for the pain and suffering that they see Blacks undergoing at this time, and are asking genuine questions about what they can do as individuals. In a sentence, can you all offer some suggestions?
So I'm sorry. So you kind of just summarized some of these questions?
Yeah, there were 2 or 3 of them that sort of proceeded that way.
Okay. So I'm sorry. So the question is just like, what can
we do as an individual?
So I would just say to really check our biases, to be able to be open to have these conversations, these awkward conversations, get to know people around you, jump out of your bubble. Let's look at what's actually going on in the world. And then, we talked about financial investment into the community, and we also talked about, oh, here's Ben. We talked about financial investment, and we just talked about, just being present and seeing where you can plug in to programs that might be in your community or your kids might be connected to. That's kind of a really broad answer, but I spoke about that earlier. It's kind of hard to answer that question. I feel like if we knew, I don't know, somebody else speak on that. I don't want to sound hopeless in that sense.
I know for me, I would just say go out and pick up Robert DiAngelo's book, White Fragility. Go ahead and read that. It's a quick bathroom read if you like to read on the toilet like I do.
Absolutely.
I would say watch 13th by Ava DuVernay. And I tell you what, you can start looking up different things on Netflix, and there's many documentaries out that begin looking at different things. I would look up James Baldwin on YouTube. There's a lot of different clips of James Baldwin. And I would ask that you take off the beautiful appearance of Martin Luther King, that we have created this glorious mosaic of a human being, and just understand that he was a rebel and a super rebel. And, you know, he didn't say, you know, I have a dream, all this other kind of stuff. And all of a sudden we have flowers and rose petals. Like, listen to the beginning of that speech and understand that he was demanding economic reform, and he was demanding things in this country that a lot of people are too scared to study. So I would also read his letter from the Birmingham jail, because he challenges those who are religious and in the religious leadership to begin fighting for those, not just those in the Black community, but for those who are disenfranchised. And I would also read, what's the book by Jesus and the Disinherited? I would read that.
Hey guys.
Hey, man.
What's up, Ben?
What's up? I just landed in Santa Rosa. How's it going?
Pretty good, man. It's always a blessing to see you, bro.
Dad, you're on
Likewise.
mute. You're on mute.
Yeah, Uncle Tim, you're muted.
Dad, you're muted.
I'm sorry, Ben, welcome. There's a question in our Q&A I'd like to pose to you, since you haven't had an opportunity to jump in. And here's the question. What is white people's role in helping to demand reparations?
And helping to demand reparations. Interesting. I think part of the challenge that isn't really a challenge, if we deploy the resources like in an authentic way, I think we have to track, and I think we can do this because of the transactional nature of America. I think we can track which institutions, universities, which I think some universities are, which corporations like Wells Fargo, which insurance agencies and brokers all had a hand in continuing or using the transatlantic slave trade to profit. You know what I mean? I think we need folks who are in positions where corporate data and I think information can be leveraged in a way to help identify how much and where that money should go. And then, like, I just don't think it's like rocket science. And I think Georgetown, I think Yale, I think Harvard, they're all kind of taking a scientific approach to tracking this. And I don't know. So I think if you have access to resources, you have someone's ear who has access to resources, you have someone who sits on a board. It's an interesting conversation to broach on a board. That's my opinion.
Yes, I think a lot of this gets down to how people who have power can find ways to give it away. And finance is just one of those. Another question that we have here is someone's fascinated by the concept of invisibility. Does that mean that white people are not acknowledging what African Americans bring to the table, or are they ignoring how our history has affected where we are now in a broader sense, physically and emotionally? What concrete steps can we take to learn that ignoring race, which we think is the right thing to do, is not the right approach?
I think the first thing that white folk need to do is understand that black people wake up every morning realizing they Black. That's why Jergens is not out of business yet. I mean, the moment we wake up and we shower, we realize that we're Black. You know what I'm saying? And it's getting cold outside, so the ash is getting ready to pick up, especially around the knuckle area. So we realize our Blackness from the moment we wake up in the morning. And so it's imperative that white people understand that they're white. and realize that they are white and realize that their whiteness gives them a certain place in the world, which is why a lot of people are calling out white privilege. And I'm aware that privilege always is a tricky word, because, you know, if someone grows up without a certain economic privilege, they don't feel like they are privileged. But, you know, being invisible just really means it encompasses everything. It encompasses the fact that the systems that were designed in the country, an economic system, a healthcare system, where people live, where people are allowed to go to school, public education, private education, those things were designed to keep us at a certain level in society. And so when we say invisibility, we don't mean like you legit do not see me walking towards you, but society says that I don't really exist unless I'm providing economic value for certain individuals in this country. And so that's kind of what I was talking about.
Thank you. There's another question out here. It says, it seems as though the national focus is now entirely on police brutality, while the other enormous issues of systemic racism, like housing and unemployment and banking, et cetera, are being completely ignored. How can we bring these into the dialogue so that the Black community can continue to succeed at higher levels?
I mean, I think for starters, it comes with education. I think it comes with knowing how economically oppressed we were and still are as a people, and being able to get into these communities, and educate how we can move forward. Like, for example, I remember talking to my dad and my brother the other day. We, as a family, have started talking about finances and have started talking about what it means to budget and what it means to build credit and what it means to establish generational wealth. That's all education that, if you look within certain sectors of the Black community, that we were kept away from, many years ago, just because we didn't have access to it. So I think if education on economic reforms and stuff are given, and access is given, I don't think we can definitely thrive as a community. It's just there's a lot of things that the community doesn't know. So what we don't know, we can't have access to, and that's been shown throughout decades and centuries.
Are there things white people can do as allies and partners to help with that effort, do you think?
I would say so. What that is, I'm not sure of right at the moment, but I would definitely say so.
Hey,
I think those of our white allies that are in finance and can go back to middle school and start teaching Series 7 and Series 7 type of, I'd say, financial aptitude, basic levels of financial aptitude. I think those folks know exactly what I'm talking about. And I think if you can help develop after school programs and a curriculum that is built around the Series 7 knowledge base in preparation for students to then graduate and then take the FINRA Series 7 exam, I think that's going to go a long way. That type of stuff can go a long way.
Here's another question. I'm not sure how much time we've got tonight, but what do you say to white people who notice your education, your professional success, and your privilege, as you say, and say that you don't have anything to complain about? Why are you whining?
To me, it would be equivalent to somebody saying to you, you didn't personally suffer in the Holocaust, so why do you care about that? Like, nobody would ever say that to you. You know what I mean? Because it just, I honestly, I can't make sense of that, because I am Black, so I feel what my people feel, and like how we've all explained this before.
Thank you.
How we've all explained this before, it's just, no, I may not, yes, I have privilege, but I've had to still be Black through it. I still had to make tough decisions to get to where I am because of the color of my skin. So yes, we have been afforded all of these opportunities. Thank God. Thank God we had that in our community, because our community doesn't. So now it's my responsibility to take what I have been afforded and to give back to my people, just in the same way that you would do the same for yours.
Okay, well, I'd like to just offer my thanks to you all for taking the time to come out and share with others, give them a window into how we live and what we think and what we're going through at this time. My prayer is that this will just be the beginning of a dialogue that would bear some fruit to literally destroying the system of racial injustice in which we live. So with that, I will thank the Federation and JCRC for having us tonight, and turn it back over to them to close us out tonight.
Go on. I'm Rabbi Eliani Golcut, and I'm really honored to be here to conclude this evening's discussion. I first want to thank the panelists, both personally, professionally, on behalf of the Federation and the JCRC. Reverend Warner, Dr. Daniels, Joya, and Jordan, for your frankness, your honesty, your insight into the beginnings of a conversation and a relationship that we hope will spur us towards change, both personally as individuals, as a Jewish community locally, and also nationally. I'm going to offer a benediction in a moment, a way of intention of sort of focusing us on steps moving forward. But before I do that, I just want to let you know that afterwards I'm going to offer an official goodbye, and that'll be the conclusion of our evening, but not the conclusion of the 3-part series that this is kicking off. There are 2 more learning, conversation, discussions on these topics. The next one specifically on the Black Jewish experience, people of color in the Jewish community. And there's more information coming your way after this evening, details about that second of the 3-part series. The panelists tonight gave us an incredible opportunity, particularly during this season that we are in now in the Jewish community. On Friday night, we're going to begin the celebration of the Jewish New Year, which is the centerpiece of a time when we are supposed to, as Jews, work on a concept called tshuva, which is often translated as repentance, but really means to turn. And the turning that we're supposed to do is we're supposed to look inward and find the spaces where we have erred, where we have made mistakes. And the panelists gave us the opportunity to do this work in a really intensive and focused way. The panelists aren't the first people to tell the Jewish people that we have work to do. All the way back in the 8th century before the Common Era, the prophet Isaiah, who was a voice, a deep voice, a strong voice for justice, asked the people on behalf of God, "What need do I have for all your sacrifices? I have many burnt offerings and fatlings, and I have no delight in any of them," God says from Isaiah's mouth. Who asked that of you? Isaiah looking out on a people that was corrupt, that were unjust, that were oppressing the orphan, the widow, and the stranger. In other words, oppressing the vulnerable population while pretending in the courtyard of the temple to be religious. Outside of the temple, we're doing nothing of the sort. And the prophet Isaiah exhorts the people, begs them to change their ways, to look at the systems in the society that were oppressing others and elevating to success certain folks. And tonight, we were listening to that voice that tells us that our society has been built on systems of oppression, systems of invisibility. And we should be reminded of the tradition of the Jewish people, not only, as Reverend Warner eloquently said, back to the civil rights era, but all the way back to our prophetic tradition, which demands of us, in the words of the prophet Isaiah, Limdu hete v'dirshu mishpat, your job as Jews, as followers of Adonai, as believers in God, is to learn to do good and devote yourself to justice. It is as simple as that, being religious. We can practice all the ritual we want, but if we do not weave in justice and goodness to all people, then we have missed the mark, according to the prophet Isaiah. And I'm afraid that's the call for tshuva this season for those of us who have garnered tremendous success in this country on the backs of others. So I pray, I offer a blessing for all of us. Holy One, blessed God of compassion, help us to illuminate the road for those we have made invisible. Give us the strength to use our privilege to make space for the voices of people of color who have been marginalized and judged based on their race and culture. Challenge us to educate ourselves about the narratives which show up systems of oppression in our country. Give us the courage to make sacrifices in our own lives so that we might open up our country to everyone, so people of color can grow and flourish and gain success, just as we, many of us, have been blessed to do. May we be swift in this journey and committed to do so. May we be blessed along the way. May we be voices and advocates for change. May we be allies, and may we support communities of color so that they too can walk with us on this journey of success, and we can build a better and stronger America along the way. May you bless us in this journey and bless our hands in this work. Amen. Thank you all for taking the time on behalf of the Federation and the JCRC. We're so grateful that you're here, that you're having this conversation, that you're listening, that you're being a voice for change. And we look forward to having you join the continued conversation in this 3-part series next time. Details to follow. Thank you so much. Thank you again to our panelists for their openness and honesty. Shana Tova, a happy and a healthy new year.